Hey, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. It's Dave with you yet again. I hope you're doing well. It's summertime. Yay! We're all doing good summer stuff, right? I hope you're having a great, safe summer. Lots of time with the family and friends. Barbecues and all that great stuff. Enjoy your summer. We're going to keep chugging away here with the How to Podcast series. And today I want to talk to you about the best resource for your podcast. It's not a tool, it's not a website, it's not a download, it's not a microphone, it's not something you can buy on Amazon. Nope. Your best resource for your podcast is actually listening to your show. Let's talk about who they are and how they can help here on the How to Podcast series. I am surprised and delighted to hear that people have not thought about this as much as a podcast host, that your listening audience could be your secret weapon to helping you with your podcast. We are all busy people, correct? We all are juggling work-life balance, family time, summer holidays, and this thing called a podcast. It can be quite overwhelming when you think about all of the tiny tasks that all add up to one big calendar suck for us as we try to balance life and podcasting. And some people give up because they just can't make this work and feel like they're overwhelmed by a sea of tons of little things that just eat away at our calendar. Everything from creating our show art to editing to research, finding guests, scheduling guests, doing all the behind the scenes stuff that nobody really sees when they push play on an episode of our podcast, but they all take time and they all take effort. And sometimes they take skills that we don't have or we don't have time to learn. And our audience might just have some of the most talented people in areas where you are struggling that you can leverage. And they would love to participate. They would love to be a part of your podcast. Maybe they can't start a podcast of their own right now, but they would love to learn and be a part of your team, and they would volunteer their time to do so. Have you ever thought about including your listeners in your podcast creation process? They're there, they're listening, and maybe they're willing to step up and help you. It's worth the ask. And I've got some things that you can consider when looking to ask for help from your audience. A few things that they can step up and help you with. You ready? Okay, well, here we go. Let's go. One of the things that we all need as podcasters is listener feedback. So reach out and make opportunities in every episode that you do that encourage listener feedback right from the very first episode. Even when you know that only your family and friends are going to listen to your first few episodes, build it into your content, that you're putting that out there to the world, that you want to hear from people. And then make it easy for them to do so. Again, if you go to howtopodcast.ca, you'll see that I have my SpeakPipe. You'll see that I have email address, ways to get in touch with me where I am found on social media. All of the links are always on my website. And I just send everybody there. It's so much easier. But encourage listener feedback right from the beginning. This is a great way for your audience to see and understand that you are looking for feedback. You're looking for their suggestions, their comments, their input can help shape the show. Remember, though, that this is your show and you have in mind what you want it to be. And if you get feedback from your listeners that is counter to what you're planning or what you're working on, thank them for their feedback, encourage more. But at the end of the day, it's your podcast, and don't chase the feedback. Have a clear idea of what you want to do, but invite feedback as often as you can. And I would say in every episode. That way people understand and they know after, I think it's like 7 times we need to hear something before it actually sinks in. So if this is your first episode, you got 6 more to go. And I'd love to hear your feedback. Another thing to consider is this whole thing is about reviews and ratings. It's one way for your audience to participate and support the show. It doesn't really have the impact that people say that it does as far as like algorithm and all that stuff. What it really does do, though, is it does provide social proof to other people that your podcast is fun, exciting, informative, really good to listen to. And it just kind of gives people that little nudge to go, hey, these people like this. I'm going to check it out. Think of a book review on Amazon. Think of a restaurant review on Google. Those are all things that people scroll down to get some idea of what other people think of a service or a place or a menu item or whatever. Your podcast can benefit from having these reviews and ratings, but it's not the end all for your podcast. So just keep that in mind. Your social media engagement, maybe there's someone in your audience who is a social media guru who would love to volunteer their time to help you with your social media content. Maybe it's creating the images for your social media. Maybe it's taking your clips for you and making audiograms or short video clips. Maybe there's somebody out there that just wants to learn how to do that so they can turn that into a business of their own, and they want to help you for free and do that for you. Put it out there. Ask your audience. Is there somebody here that would love to do it? Maybe there's a student in school that's working on a project, and working with you could be the one thing that they can use as an assignment to show their teacher. Put it out there. You never know who's going to answer, and they never know if you need help until you ask. I like the idea of putting out to my audience that the graphics that go along with my podcast episodes. Coming soon in the fall of 2023, Apple's going to be allowing us to have artwork for each episode that's independent, unique to that episode. Where some other apps have been doing this for a while, Apple's finally getting into it. So that's exciting. So maybe you want to do episode art that reflects the content of each episode and changes from episode to episode. Maybe you have someone on your listening community that would be interested in creating that for you, or multiple people who would like to do that for you. They can build it in Canva and send it right to you. Maybe there's some creative people that you can leverage from your audience to help you do that. That's just a nice bonus. And they get the joy of seeing their artwork on your podcast, and you can give them a little shout out and thank them for their efforts. It's a great way to get people involved in the show. So you don't have to create all your artwork. Let them help you with that. It's something that you can put in front of them and encourage them to step up and give you a hand. And that might free up your calendar to do other things. The other thing you can do is definitely put out there to your crowd, to your listeners, about crowdfunding and donations. Your listeners love your show. Your listeners come back week after week, episode after episode, to hear what you have to say and to be a part of your community. And there's a perception, possibly from the listener's perspective, that you don't need financial help with your podcast. They don't know how much it costs per week, per month, per year to do what you're doing. They have no concept because they're not podcasters and they don't have a monthly bill that they have to pay to do what you do. So let them know. Every week it costs me $25 to create this podcast and put it out to the world. Let them know that that's the cost. And give them options on how they can support you. Everything from buy me a coffee, which I have, over on howtopodcast.ca. You can go there and buy me a $5 coffee, and I can use that money to help pay for all of the costs for this podcast. It's right there on the website. You can do other things. You can do Patreon, where people can give you a monthly fee, a monthly payment that you can count on. There's other ways to do this. So put out options for people to make donations and to crowdfund your show. And that might be some of the engagement that your audience is looking to provide to you when you're clear with them and let them know that, yes, I need help. And this podcast does cost money. I'm a single parent. I have to put groceries on the table. I work full time, and I'm doing this podcast for you. So if you can help me, that would be great. That could be what you talk about on your podcast, and let them know and be open and honest with them that this is something that costs me money, but I love doing it. And if you're willing to help, thank you. It means a lot. Put it out there for them so they understand and they know. Something that's really difficult to get off the ground early in your podcasting days, episodes 1 through 20, let's say, is getting engagement from your audiences in the form of a question and answer that you pose to your listening audience. This can be really scary and I'm doing this here on the podcast, and I've got a great listening base. But putting a question out into the world of your listeners and asking for them to respond. Again, you can go to howtopodcast.ca. My current question is, if you had one call to action in your podcast, what would it be and why? And let us know what your podcast is about and where we can find it. So that's my current question that's out there. And if you want to answer that, you can go to howtopodcast.ca and click the microphone and leave me your message and promote your show at the same time. I'd love to do that and share that here on the podcast. Now, to date, I haven't had anyone respond to that request. All of you that are listening, I have had 0 people respond to that at this point, at the time of recording. And I'm just leaving it out there, and I know it's going to take time to build up that trust and that remembrance in your mind to go, oh yeah, Dave keeps asking for that, I forgot. Let your audience be a part of the show. Bring their comments and their questions and their thoughts into the show. Let them promote their podcast. Let them promote their thing. And get them to leave you voice messages, which you can then bring in to the show. And everyone loves to hear their own voice on a podcast. So put that out there in front of them. Ask some questions. Get some answers. Put a poll up on your social media. Do something that causes interaction and gives people a chance to speak and share their thoughts on the content for your show. It's great to get that kind of participation. The other thing you can do is get guest recommendations. I have a podcast called Living the Next Chapter. And on there, I either go through guests and ask for their answer to this question, or I reach out to my listeners as well and say, who would be a great guest for this show? What author do you enjoy that you would love to hear on this podcast? And what I do then, when I get these recommendations from other guests or from listeners, is I reach out on behalf of them to that potential guest and say, author A, I just heard from this person and they would love to hear your story on my podcast. They love your books and they're requesting you to be on my show. That's an interesting request that would pop up in an email or correspondence from me to a potential guest, that you've been requested on this show by a listener. Your community wants to hear you on my show. Getting those kind of requests from your audience on who should be on your show or the topics you should cover, that is amazing. Because as content creators, sometimes that well of content is a little dry. And we're searching for the next topic for next week's show. And we need a little help. So let your audience shape the show and recommend what they want to hear. And then, as always, give credit where credit is due and say, this episode was brought to you by so-and-so. This was their idea. This is their question. And again, one more thing. If your audience suggests a guest for your show, ask them for some questions specifically from them to ask your guest, so that when the guest of their choice comes on your show, you can then say, you know, Amy is the one that asked to have you on my show. So Amy, thank you for making this recommendation. Guest A, Amy has a question for you, and this is Amy's question. Amy asks, and then asks the question. Amy is now part of your podcast, and your guest gets to talk to Amy directly. Amy loves your guest. Your guest now gets to know Amy, and you're the hero as a podcast because you made it all happen. So poll your audience, get guest suggestions, get topic ideas, and give credit where credit is due when your audience steps up and helps you direct your show. You can also use social media more as a tool to bring people to your episodes than just preaching to the choir, as some people would say. For the most part. Let's make general assumptions here. We're all friends, right? In general terms, the people that are following you on social media are most likely listeners to your show. or at least know about your show. At least very unlikely that they have any idea that you don't have a show and when they're following you on your podcast, on your social media. So keep this in mind that when you post to your social media that you have a new episode, most of your followers on those platforms, if they're following your show and subscribed, they already got a notification on their phone before you created the content. They already know that your guest is coming on. They already know what episode's coming out next. They already know all that information because it's right there on their phone. And we want everyone to subscribe and follow us on all our different apps that they listen. So you're kind of preaching to the choir. What I'd love for you to consider then is leverage your social media, not to tell people about your next episode or your next guest, but to give your audience the tools to share your show. For them to be your spokesperson, for them to share with their community about your podcast, because their community doesn't know who you are. So let your followers then encourage them to take your content on social media and share it. So by involving your audience in various aspects of your podcast, you can foster a strong community, gain valuable support, create content that resonates with your listeners, and get the help that you need to continue your podcast. You don't have to do this all by yourself. You don't have to wear all the hats. There are people that are listening to your show, had they known that you needed help, would have stepped up a long time ago. Had they known that you need help with finances to help pay for the show, they would have contributed long ago. There's this assumption that you have it all figured out. You're a podcaster. You're the one that is doing all this amazing stuff, and I'm just a casual listener. I'm one of those silent audience members. But if I knew you needed help, I would have stepped up. If I knew you needed help financially, I would have given. By reminding your audience that they are not just casual listeners, they're not just nameless, faceless people in your audience, they're your community. That reciprocation of you're giving them value by giving them content, they can also give you value back by support, encouragement, finances, whatever it is for them. And a whole bunch of little things put together adds up to one big thing. So even if it seems small, it does mean a lot. Remember to express gratitude and acknowledge their contributions for everything. And keep them engaged and motivated to support your podcast's ongoing success. Keep your audience in the loop. Your audience is your best free resource for your podcast. And I think, for the most part, as podcasters, we're not leveraging our audience the way we could. So try today. What can you do to leverage your audience and make them part of your show? Not just a listener, but a part of your show. I would love to hear what's working for you in this way and maybe some of the challenges. Let me know over at howtopodcast.ca. I would love to hear from you. And again, the question that's out there is if you had one call to action for your podcast, one thing that you wanted your listeners to do, what would it be and why? And also promote your podcast at the same time. Let us know about your show and where we can find it. And do all of that at howtopodcast.ca. Click the microphone button, leave me a voice message, and tell me the answer to this question. Would love to hear from your voice on this show. And thank you for being part of the podcast. Keep podcasting. Take care.